Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. Let's do a review a week after the release of Error Game Reset, the game that is a big collaboration between Sega, Yoko Taro, and character designer Yugen. And before I forget, the developer said they are working on a global version, but for a reason I will explain at the end of the video, I will not pick up that version. I will stick to the JP version. And I feel like I change up the format of my mobile game reviews for every new game, but let's do something different again here. First, I'll talk about the one thing I love best, then I'll talk about the one thing that I hate most, then I'll go back and then briefly talk about more things that I love, then some things that I just like, and then finally things that I dislike. But in a nutshell, I'm enjoying the game to a surprising degree. I had zero expectations coming in, and I think it is getting unfairly dumped on social media, but I'll talk about that in a future video where I analyze the launch of the game and its performance and future prospects. But first, the one thing that I love most, that is the boss battles. They give you what you want from good boss battles. Interesting and unique attack patterns that require different strategies and builds to beat, and an appropriate kind of presentation, an appropriate sense of epicness. And I would say they are the number one reason to play the game. For quote-unquote true gamers, interested in gameplay over story, world, characters, etc. Not to say that people playing the game for the story and world and characters are not legit players, but like I fall into this category, you know? A game can be great, but if it doesn't have the gameplay, I will drop it, like Kotobuki. As another example, I love Final Fantasy X-2 for the job system, and I will replay the game just for that, even though I dislike everything about the game. So the fact that Error Game Reset has a kind of a strong and then interesting boss battle setup makes me want to stick with the game. Here I'm going to transition into talking about gameplay, and then we'll come back to bosses. But this is my first shooting mobile game, and trying it strikes me as a pretty natural match. Auto attack often gets panned in mobile games, but it works here. It highlights the importance of maneuvering and dodging, which is a staple of the shoot-'em-up style of game. And then in this game, if you build your team strong enough, you can brute force a quest by either tanking all the damage or doing tons of damage quickly. But if you can't accomplish either of those two things, you can use manual movement to clear it through skill. It's the same thing in like Gradius, for example. You turn on turbo, you have your stuff firing all stage without any rest, and then you just focus on maneuvering and then selecting power-ups. Gameplay styles or genres on mobile are limited because of the lack of physical buttons, but controlling movement is easy on a touchscreen, so this game has a gameplay feel closer to console or arcade than some other mobile games, and then it can enable boss fights that feel closer to console or arcade experiences. But yeah, the boss fights are a great combination of nostalgic visual design, like the Octopus Darius boss has 8 targetable weak points, and then also on-theme battle design, like Virtua Fighter shooting rocket fists at you. And it makes me look forward to seeing what the next boss is going to be like, which is a rare feeling in a mobile game. And then there is a strong RPG/simulation element, which comes in at the team building part, but I'll talk about that later. Next, let's talk about the one thing that I hate, which is the orientation of the game. It plays in landscape, which is common for shoot-'em-ups. You got like R-Type and Darius, but battle plays out vertically. And so on the battle screen, you have the boss up there, and then the field of movement down there, and then you have all this empty space on the left and right, and then everything becomes super tiny. It feels like looking through a telescope the wrong way. I have pretty good eyes, so I can see what's going on and I can play the game pretty normally and have fun, but I feel like I can't enjoy what I'm looking at. Like, I would like to be able to look at, you know, my characters more closely during battle, and then look at the boss more closely as I'm fighting them, but everything's very small the way that it's presented. There are two fixes to this. One is to change the orientation of the game so we hold it in portrait to play. Or two, change the battle only to landscape so that the boss is like on the right and our movement field is on the left. both of those two options would be pretty heavy lifts by the developers, because they would be essentially redoing, either parts of the game or the entire game. And I am positive there was a debate early on in the development about how to set up the orientation of the game and the orientation of battle, and the wrong side won out, unfortunately. But going forward, anytime there's any kind of user feedback, I will be sure to bring up orientation. And I'm sure the developers are aware of it already, but won't act on it unless users bring it up. Okay, and then here let's go more briefly. More things that I love. There's that RPG/simulation team building aspect, and then the pool of characters is actually pretty small, and so what ends up happening is that every character is good and useful. So it doesn't matter if they come out as like 2-star or 1-star, or if they are handout or whatever, because you have like different elements, and then you have like different roles, like attackers or tanks or supporters or healers. And then at a certain point, the game requires you, to have different elements and different roles covered, so all of the lower rarity characters get used, and that's fun. And I'm actually aiming to max out all of the lower rarity characters too. Next, another category of things that I like are the music, the menus, and then the sound effects. They're all really well done. Kind of like techno and upbeat. And then a lot of the menus are very, also kind of like futuristic, a lot of like gray or silver, and like it's shiny and stuff. But there's a lot of kind of retro elements too, like, pixelated effects, when you do taps and things. So it's an interesting mix of new and old. Which also relates to the next thing that I love, which is the character design. It's, a mix of new and old. You have these, legacy games, but they are kind of brought into the present with these gijinka, these changes into the little girl designs. And it's fun. It's very creative how they do that. It's fun to look at them and think how they get across the old game. And then finally, for something that I love, and this is very important in a gameplay aspect when talking about mobile games, but the incremental progression is fun every step of the way. This is kind of a hard balance to achieve. Some games are good at this, like Near Reincarnation. Some games are not good at this, like War of the Visions. But like having, interesting gameplay options of every level of user kind of account progression is very important. And then also it just feels good, you get the little shots of endorphin when you accomplish something new, or you unlock a new reward or something. And this game does that very well. Okay, next let's talk about things that I like, not necessarily love. One is the world. That might sound surprising. The world is very cool. It's a kind of a dystopian future where Sega is like the most powerful company in the world and is trying to remake it in its image, and it's like evil, at its heart, and it's using these kind of brainwashed evil versions of the cast, the little girl versions of the video games to take over the world. But world is one thing, story is another, and I'll talk about story in a little bit. And then as for another thing that I just like rather than love, are the game modes for Dungeon and Arena. This is more because I haven't really touched them yet, but they kind of strike me as more simulation style game rather than shooting. But in there, the battle is just totally auto. All of the gameplay comes in the team building and then like the formation, and then like reading what you're going to go against. It's a different kind of way of thinking. It's a different game style. Maybe I will enjoy it more as I progress through the game more. But as of now, Arena can only be played 5 times a day, so the focus for the game is definitely going to be more on single-player PvE, fighting those interesting boss fights, rather than PvP. Releasing units specifically for PvP in order to get people to pay and pull for those. Instead, they'll be releasing, limited time events with strong bosses, and then also releasing banner units at the same time, which are very good for those events in order to drive sales. I'm more of a fan of the PvE style. Okay, finally, let's talk about things that I dislike. One is the stinginess with stamina. Very, very stingy. There are frequently times in the game where just like I run out of stamina and then I can't go anymore, because in order to refresh your stamina you have to pay the 40 gems. And then that leads me to my next thing that I dislike, that is gem stinginess. But yeah, you only get 10 gems for beating a new quest for the first time. So yeah, refreshes of stamina are very expensive, and then there's no like item which you can use to restore your stamina, so you're only kind of left with paying gems, which are very expensive, which you don't want to do, and so you just end up playing less, and that's not fun. But yeah, related to the gem stinginess is the cost of pulling the hatcher, doing the 10-shot. 1,500 to do that, and you only get 10 for beating a mission, so you have to beat 150 missions to pull a 10-shot. That's not very generous at all. Okay, next, things I dislike. I actually hate this, but I know that it's not going to change, so we'll just upgrade it to dislike, I guess. But that's the 2% pull rate for the rare get in the banner. It's the new industry standard. I can still remember when it was like 4 or 6 or 8. It just keeps getting lower because I think it's getting more and more difficult for the developers to make money on their games. So they have to lower the pull rate. But there is the ceiling. If you do the 200 pulls, you can exchange for the character, so that's also industry standard there. I wish it would change, but it's not going to, so whatever. Okay, and then finally, the last thing that I dislike, which is going to be the main reason why I will not be picking up the global version, that is the story. I am not impressed with it so far. I just said that the world is very well done, but there doesn't really seem to be anything super interesting happening within it as far as like, events or plot. It might pick up later, but as of now, it's just a lot of characters going back and forth like, I'm gonna beat you, and no you're not, I'm gonna beat you. It's not very compelling. So that's why I don't feel any desire to pick up the global version. I don't need that translation. But yeah, I am impressed with the gameplay, and I'm going to stick with it. In a future video, I will talk about sort of the rocky launch of the game, and what its future prospects are looking like, including shutdown percentages. Okay, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.